Hello and welcome everybody to the Second Page Podcast. My name is Joseph Oswald.
And I'm Jay Martinez. Welcome to episode 101.
Today we're going to be talking past the points. On this episode, a number of issues are going to be brought up that have been talked about over the week. Specifically, we're going to be talking about things like Colin Kaepernick's taking a knee, some things like the Second Amendment, other issues including recent elections in Alabama and Georgia, and anything else that we find relevant, but going deeper into just the hot button issues. We don't want to focus too much on the things that everybody is saying today. The point of the second page is to go past what everybody else is talking about and really find out why they're talking about it. For our first episode, we know that the past couple of weeks, most people have been focusing a lot on Colin Kaepernick in the NFL, specifically the taking a knee situation during the national anthem, and Colin Kaepernick suing the NFL, alleging collusion to keep him out of a job. So Jay and I will be discussing these issues in a sort of debate format, but also in a free way, so that anything that we say can be discussed by anybody at home, regardless of what your political leanings are. Um, First of all, I'd like to ask Jay to open up on Colin Kaepernick, since sports is his strong suit.
Well, I mean, I'm not that interested in the NFL anymore this season. Aaron Rodgers, my boy, he's out. So, but anyway, so back to Cap. The big news this week, it came out that he was suing the NFL for alleged collusion. I guess my question would be: do you think he has a case? And do you think now he's taking away from his initial message and muddying up the waters a little bit more by doing this?
Well, one of the things that when I think about this issue, I actually look at it in a macro view is, should America as a society be taking a knee? And in general, when people say taking a knee in any sport context, you take a knee to show your respect and your hope that a person who is injured on the field will recover and will be taken care of. So, in a way, is the American dream, is American democracy, is our society injured to the point where we should all be taking a knee and reflecting on why people are doing what they're doing? Most people either believe that Colin Kaepernick is taking a knee to protest America or the national anthem, or to slight our veterans and soldiers, when the real message that he intended was that minorities in this country, specifically African Americans, have been abused by the system and by the very country in which we are all supposed to be pledging allegiance or be supporting or respecting. I was under the idea that he had actually chosen to protest by taking a knee during the national anthem at the bequest of a former soldier who had recommended that as a respectful way to do so. One thing that people talked about this week was the NFL's game in London. As part of the NFL's effort to spread American football over the Atlantic, the players stood for God Save the Queen, which is the national anthem of the United Kingdom. However, some players took a knee for the American national anthem. What we'd like to do here on the second page is look past the first page, which is people saying it's either against America or you're for America. You have people on both sides that very heartily disagree with each other. People are burning their team's memorabilia, jerseys,
season
logos,
tickets,
season tickets.
Which is a lot of money. That's nuts.
I'm sure they can get a copy back. But the point is that in a way, it's almost a hypocrisy where you're saying that someone does not have the right to protest something, and you're protesting that. So,
but how do you think the original message was lost, and why was it lost? I mean, it's been clear from the beginning that this is police brutality, and it's morphed into something about the flag. It's morphed into something about being unpatriotic against America, and it really feels to some extent like white people are telling black people how they can protest, and it obviously that doesn't seem right. It shouldn't be right. And why was that message skewed? I think it's a testament to today's media news cycle, social media, quote unquote fake news. And we just have to get back to the original point and the original intention. And, you can disagree or agree whether there's any merit there, but we can't tell a man who's using his First Amendment right to advocate for something he believes in. And then a lot of people are calling these rich, whiny athletes. Why can't they just do their job? Blah blah blah. Well, that's because they're propping up a segment of the community that doesn't have a voice or doesn't have a platform. So why is he being denounced for speaking up for a community that only he can speak of and only maybe people like him would understand? So to that, I really think it's a big deal that the whole meaning got lost and it's become about something else completely.
Well, obviously, it didn't take up any steam until the current president had mentioned it and made a firestorm out of it because Colin Kaepernick had his reasons why he was doing it, and then, like many other things that are taken out of context, someone else says something, and then that rolls the ball down a different hill. Now, whether or not the message was lost or not, you now have some 300 plus members of the NFL, including members of the National Hockey League, the Major League Baseball, even some intramural sports, some college and high school sports. You have now directors of schools either saying that they will kick people off teams, bench them, all forms of punishment if they do not stand in respect. And so we have to go to the point where is it still the same if you have a boot on your throat telling you to stand? Is it still free speech, or are we still living in a democracy where you only get one choice? Because that's what you have in places like North Korea and China, where they say they're a democracy, but you only get one option. Is that really the country that we want to live in? Because at the same respect, you have the hypocrisy of, well, if you're going to tell Colin Kaepernick he can't take a knee, then why should a white supremacist be able to march in Charlottesville? Yeah. Why should they be able to burn tiki torches and burn in effigy images of prominent African Americans and other minorities? Why should they be able to parade the Confederate flag around while at the same time saying that it's disrespectful for someone to peaceably take a knee and try to bring to light the issue of inequality in America? And I see things on Facebook and other social media that says, well, how come nobody cares about the 500 plus African Americans that have died by gun violence in Chicago? Well, most of those people that have died or were victims or perpetrators of that do not wear a uniform with an NFL logo on it. They don't have the platform, exactly. They don't have that kind of platform. And when someone like Colin Kaepernick is willing to sacrifice a prominent career, a very promising career, millions of dollars, and he's willing to give that up to bring to light an issue that affects all people that look like him, whether or not they're the same shade or not, whether or not you're black or white or Asian or from any country in the entire world. America is supposed to be a melting pot. So,
well, but then doesn't this go into a bigger picture of some blatant hypocrisy, or maybe just a lack of understanding of what exactly it means to be American? I feel that people nowadays, they choose which part of being American they like, forgetting that there's a whole, that we're free for a reason, and we're free to do things that people might agree with and that people might not, and we shouldn't hinder those freedoms. For example, I find it really ridiculous that some people are putting more importance into a flag, which is cloth, over what that flag represents. That flag represents the fact that he could take a knee. Now, there's another issue, and one that I believe does have some merit. Should an employee be able to protest during work? I think that as an employee, as a person being paid for, an owner, a league, they can tell you no. And I don't think it's infringing upon your First Amendment right. But the fact is that people are using this argument and talking down on these players when the league is behind them. I mean, Roger Goodell said he's not going to force anyone. I mean, Jerry Jones said he was going to fire someone, but please, if Ezekiel or Dak Prescott took a knee, he's not going to fire them. I mean, he's not. You're just tanking the whole season. Business. Yeah, so I mean, are you really, really going to stand by that when your star players are the one? And maybe that's what it's going to take. Maybe it's going to take an Aaron Rodgers or an Ezekiel Elliott to start, to do things in solidarity with Cap and with the initial message and to bring the message back to what it originally meant. But that also plays into the fact that I think politics is a contact sport, like football. We root for our team. We're blue or we're red. We're a Democrat or we're a Republican. And the whole middle of the both political spectrums has been lost. We don't get informed past the talking points, and that influences who we like and who we don't like. And there's no parameter or there's no freedom to move past that, I think. And some people feel really limited and beholden to who they chose as their team. And that's a bigger issue that, is not only affecting us as a nation within politics, within our culture. I mean, you can see it here in the NFL and in the election of Donald Trump in 2016. So I mean, yeah, politics is a contact sports nowadays, and I think we need to find a way to get past that in a way that's beneficial to everyone and to get our country back on track.
Well, America's always been a country that really cares a lot about image. I mean, as of late, it seems like America is now some reality TV show. Most people, they watch TV, they go on social media, and they immediately want to choose sides. Go back to the reference with Twilight. Are you team werewolf guy or are you team vampire guy?
And then trolling whoever doesn't think like you.
Exactly.
That's
And
the
if
other
they
half
don't,
part for it.
if they don't agree with you, then all of a sudden every other opinion that that person has is somehow wrong. But here on the second page, we like to not think that anybody is wrong. One quote that I tend to remember is that a lot of people judge others by their actions and not their intent, but judge themselves by their intent and not their actions. While Colin Kaepernick's intent for taking a knee was to highlight the, I suppose, racism or bigotry or inequality that exists in the community that he represents, the action was perceived by the people who saw it as something that could be pounced on, that could be a reason why you can hate him without having to say it's because of his race.
But was it really perceived, or do you think there was a concerted effort to make people
Well, that's
think?
what I mean.
Yeah.
There was an effort to draw the attention away from what he was doing, to give someone else a talking point, to promote someone else's idea of what it is, because a lot of people like to hide behind nationalism. A lot of people like to wrap themselves up in the flag and say, this is who you are, and if you're not with us, you're against us, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But with regards to him suing now the NFL for collusion, a lot of people would say businesses should not be forced to hire someone, but we do have laws on the books that protect people from being discharged from work for things like their race or their creed or religion, things of that nature. The very First Amendment to the Constitution says Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or bridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances.
Well, we have a constitutional specialist on the show.
Indeed. that is a amendment that was written to protect the people from the government coming in and telling them what they can and cannot believe. Now, with that interpretation, I don't believe that the NFL should be forced to hire him, but if he can prove that they're deliberately not hiring him, well, if you have a star player, someone who is good at their job, who made no real mistakes, and maybe he wasn't the best at the time.
I don't know if he was a star player at that moment. He had his seasons, but he was definitely a backup.
Didn't he?
He was a backup quarterback.
In any case, if he can still prove that they deliberately aren't hiring him because of that, then that's collusion. And just like in the business world, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But it's such a hard case to prove that I think that it's actually detrimental to his original cause by going down this route. If he's not going to get hired, then fine. I think that he should drop the suit. I think that he should try and find a job on a talk show. Maybe he can,
or maybe he should just be a community activist. I mean,
exactly.
He's done a lot of good, and that's very much underreported. He's donated, I forget the exact amount, but a lot of money to inner city youth, to specific programs to help educate, people, to help combat racism, and that's, it's underreported. I mean, how much more American can you get when you're giving up your own money to help, underprivileged people or people that don't have a platform? And that's all being lost. And to circle back into the political divide, I want to talk about another big thing that happened this week, which was the speech between Bush and Obama. But before the show, you had mentioned that you wanted to briefly touch on something about King George. You didn't let me in on it, so I'm just bringing you back to that. How does that play into your idea of the political divide that we're currently experiencing in 2017?
Okay, well, during the American Revolution, obviously, we didn't just up and decide to, stop being a colony and stop having loyalty to the crown. There was plenty
That's not
of
what
people,
happened?
No.
Oh.
There were plenty of people that wanted to stay loyal to the king, that believed that the British crown was the only way that the American colonies could survive.
Yeah,
but there were also plenty of people that thought that there was no way that we could be ourselves while under the thumb of a king. And the monarch himself, after we left, I hope I'm not misquoting him, but had lamented that he felt sorry for us as Americans, that we may one day destroy ourselves for lack of a monarch. In saying that, he believed that there was no way that any nation could survive without a single head, without one person telling them what to do.
Or government, which is what, and again, I hope I'm not misquoting, but I think James Madison had said that if men were angels, government would not be necessary. And I mean, I think that's accurate to a certain extent.
Well,
We've talked about it before.
later on in the
Very
show when we,
Hobbesian.
pardon?
Hobbesian.
It's a Hobbesian, yes.
Oh,
Well, later on in the show, when we talk about the Second Amendment, we are going to be going into why it even exists in the first place and what the whole point of establishing a constitution 10 years after we declared independence. I mean, most people don't realize that the Constitution was ratified in 1787, 10 years after that we lived under Articles of Confederation beforehand because we didn't want to put too much power in any one person's hands. At the same time, the First Amendment does not protect people from people, it protects people from the government. So when we talk about things like Colin Kaepernick's protest, or when we talk about, George Bush or Barack Obama saying what they want to say now as private citizens, we have to remember that anybody can react to that and anybody can say what they want about that. But as soon as speech turns into violence or the advocation of violence, much as you cannot yell fire in a theater, that's when you're not talking about the Constitution anymore. You're talking about primal instincts. You're talking about how you genuinely feel inside and towards another human being. So if we're going to talk about, the fact that we left the monarchy of King George III, who thought that loyalty to the crown was a divine right and not something that you earn. On the other hand, Americans thought you had to earn it. You had to be elected by the people. You had to be elected by
did
the
Trump
House of
earn it?
Representatives. Did he earn it? Maybe he did because he knew what the right things were to say to get people riled up and to get them to the voting booth. But as statisticians will note, less than half of the eligible voters actually came out and voted. And during the primary season, you had this person deliberately going outside the norms of a primary, holding of rallies for the troops so that he can seem more patriotic
yeah, and
instead of debating or flying around on his jet.
and
with
he's still
evangelical
doing that.
preachers.
He's still on campaign mode. He's not really
He hasn't given
legislating. He's
up
not
because
governing.
he
He's
loves the campaigns.
yeah.
He loves that
He
feeling.
he loves adoration. He's a narcissist. He's a clear definition of a narcissist. But back to the speech, the comments that both Bush and Obama made this week. A lot of people we spoke about it before the show. Our producer definitely has his ideas on the topic. Should presidents break protocol, ex-presidents, and combat what they see as wrong in the office? Clearly, what's wrong with Trump, in some people's opinion, that he's not capable of, leading us. He's not the right type of temperament to be president of the United States. And they basically said that as well. They both went after nationalism, blatant nationalism. This whole, we're falling back to prejudices and ideas that we've had for a very long time that we thought we were getting up under from. I mean, the Obama election in '08 was all about hope. It was all about moving forward, and it worked. It really got a lot of people to come out to vote. It got people excited. And then 8 years later, it turns into a campaign of smearing, of fear, of fake news, of sound bites.
It's a violent pendulum. It swung back after George Bush got elected. We suffered through 9/11. We were told that anything could kill us. Everybody's out to get us. The world hates us for our freedom. The world hates us for our democracy. And then we go and we ruin it ourselves by unpopularly electing someone who ran on a campaign of vitriol, of hatred, of violence, of lying to people because there was no way to fact check. And even if you did tell someone, you're wrong, you're not saying it right, all he had to do was say, no, I'm not.
Yeah,
or I didn't say that, and it didn't matter because you move past it because there's so many things in the cycle right now. You just move right past it to the next thing, and they're like, okay, let's keep up. It's kind of like the dog catching the car. If we actually caught him, and if he actually for once apologized for anything that he's ever said,
we wouldn't know what to do.
We wouldn't know what to do.
I don't think he'd know what to do.
Well, that's probably what he thought
Well,
after the phone call with that widow.
Obama clearly said it, that we can't complain about what happened if you didn't vote. And he was saying that to his supporters. People were there to listen to him. So I really think it was a moment of self-examination on, not on his part only, but he almost like as he was speaking for the Democratic Party at this moment, because I don't think the Democratic Party has found its soul or what its messaging would be to combat Trump. And back to the point of the speeches and, something that Steve had wanted to touch upon, should the Democratic Party or the next candidate or anyone who's against Trump, should we lower ourselves to his perceived level, or should we maintain a certain sense of decorum that's been part of the presidency, part of our politics, since our inception?
I think that if we're going to bring ourselves down to that level, that we should figuratively take a knee down to that level.
And
Yeah,
that's what you meant.
almost like addressing a child. When you speak to your child, you take a knee, you come down to eye level, and you speak to them on their terms and on their level. Oftentimes, I've been accused of being pretentious. I use a lot of big words. I like to speak eloquently whenever I can. So sometimes people take that as if I'm being condescending towards them. And that's kind of like how I see people talking to Trump or to his supporters. They won't understand you if you don't talk to them on their level. If you don't speak to them in a way that they understand, which I believe wholeheartedly is why he got elected, because he spoke to people in a way they understood.
Yeah.
In reference to Hillary Clinton, who tried to speak as if she was writing a term paper for college, or if she was having a debate club at Wesleyan
But I mean,
or Wesleyan.
yeah, but I mean, that became something that people, you know, shot down Obama for towards the end, but it was something that people appreciated in the beginning. You have a
we
constitutional scholar, you have someone that knows how to speak well and get the points across well, and that's real leadership. But the two-party system. Let's get off of this for a little bit. The two-party system is
political parties
in the U.S.
States. 50 over 50. Yet,
and what do we do to move forward from a two-party? Because I really don't think it's helping. I mean, the divide in America is huge, and we as Americans, there's how many of us? Between 300, 400 million Americans. We're asked to limit ourselves and label ourselves as either Democrat or as Republican, and we have to firmly believe on whatever they believe. What if you're a person like me? I have, I have very left tendencies, but I not on everything. I mean, my views on the Second Amendment might not be what some of my more left friends would agree with. So where do I fit in? When I'm on Facebook, when I'm having a debate with someone, and the minute that I say something bad about Trump or something I might not disagree with, they don't think of me as a person that, oh, he doesn't agree with it because there's another reason behind it. He doesn't agree with it because he's a snowflake. He's a commie. That's all I'm ever called. Commie, lefty, socialist. You're not even talking to me. You're talking past me and yelling at me with all these quote unquote talking points that I think have become the main way that our politics is introduced and disseminated in our society now, especially because of social media.
I think that's why it's really good to have podcasts like this, like The Second Page, because they're both of us are in that same boat where we don't really associate as a Democrat or as a Republican, regardless of what our registration is. But we also have to take into consideration the United States is 50 little countries bound together under the Constitution, and every state has different rules for how you can be represented. So if you don't register as a Democrat or as a Republican, in most places you can't vote in those primaries. So you have 5, maybe 10% of the population choosing who will be put up in the end for a general election, which doesn't really give the rest of America, the other 90% of the voters, an actual choice. It gives them the choice between what those guys said and what those guys said. And if you don't raise enough money or if you don't get enough viewers, much like in the New Jersey gubernatorial election, November 7th, you have Phil Murphy running, who started running probably a year and a half ago.
Go Phil.
And then you have Kim Guadagno, Chris Christie's lieutenant governor, the first lieutenant governor in New Jersey, who is constantly being pegged to him and being pegged to Trump, and Phil Murphy's being constantly pegged to Goldman Sachs. And it's an attack on your Democrat, so you believe in the banking and overregulation and you want to tax everybody to death, or you're Republican and you want to give all the money to the rich and loosen all the rules and let it be a free-for-all. People are told that unless you choose to be a Democrat or Republican, you basically don't get a voice or a say in how things are done. But a strong majority of this country, I believe, is very independent-minded, where if they could, they wouldn't choose a Democrat or a Republican. They would choose a person more like them, because in all honesty, Donald Trump is not like a majority of us, and Hillary Clinton was not like a majority of us. Neither was Gary Johnson or Jill Stein. Yeah. Those people weren't who we, or at least who the people that I see, and I've traveled all across.
They're not the elite. They're not the main. They're not the varsity team. And isn't that a testament though to this past election? This is a topic for maybe another show. I don't want to delve into this immediately, but I really feel that Bernie got cheated by the DNC.
Well, that's being handled in a Supreme Court case,
but it's irrelevant now. It's irrelevant to the point of what happened.
Well, Trump's actually, in office. There's one point that I'd like to make now that you brought that up. Is in that case, the DNC basically made an argument for why they chose to do what they did, in saying that because the DNC is a private organization, a political organization, that they are not subject to the jurisdiction of these laws. That if they colluded to ensure Hillary Clinton got the nomination, that was their right as a political entity separate from the United States
That's
government.
garbage.
It is, but that was one of the, I believe, 7 arguments that they made. So, and of course, that didn't get much publicity because Debbie Wasserman Schultz stepped down, a new DNC chair came in.
Perez.
Yeah, and again, Bernie Sanders appears behind Chuck Schumer every time they go and talk about something because they know that they need the image of Bernie Sanders there, but the DNC Democrats didn't necessarily support him, and I understand that because he was not a quote unquote Democrat. He was not a registered Democrat. He just did what Trump did, and he ran on the party because he knew that that was the party that he would get the
So
nomination.
how do we open it up realistically for other people, everyday people, to run under a different platform and make? I mean, we can go on forever about this, but in a real quick way, what do you think we need to do as a nation to maybe even start?
Well, listen,
that
you
process?
got California being one of the most liberal states in the union had a Supreme Court case where they tried to open up primaries and say anybody can run on anybody's primary. And that was the mistake in saying that anybody could run on anybody else's primary. If you go to the city of Paterson, New Jersey, where they have nonpartisan elections, where 50 different people can run and you've got all these different names and you don't really know who's who, you're not going to be able to associate with anybody. So on that end of the spectrum, it's bad, and on the other end, it's bad. You have to, just like the second page, find somewhere in the middle where does it work? I mean, do we associate only with party or do we associate only with someone's name? And really, I'm not sure that there is a full-on right answer to that actually solves these things because that Supreme Court case was decided in favor of the parties. You can't hijack someone's party because that is the First Amendment right to
form a party,
to assemble, to peaceably assemble, to have the right to speak and to establish a political party and petition your government for redress.
Yeah.
So 50 little countries bound together. Every one of them is going to be different.
How about campaign finance reform? If you take the money out of it that you would get from the parties, and you could only go based on donations that you get from people, maybe that would level the playing field to not tie people to.
It looked almost as if that was going to happen when Obama ran. Because Obama made a lot of, and so did Bernie. I mean, actually, now in this past election, they got a lot of money from private.
$27 a person.
Yeah, I mean, I donated to both of them. Like, I'm not rich, $20, $50 here when you could. But yeah, I mean, I really thought that was gonna at least start and happen. It's not happening now. I forget the name of the division. You probably will know
Citizens United.
Citizens United. When you're actually saying that a corporation is a person and that they can influence, they can lobby, they can, do everything a person can do in politics.
It basically makes $1 to one vote. And if I only have $20, that means I have 20
and when
votes,
they have
and they've got
100 million,
yeah. So honestly, campaign finance reform, which is such a massive thing. You've got like Dodd-Frank bills, and you've got all these people trying to introduce legislation, and then you have just as many people trying to destroy it. Everything it's mutually assured destruction.
But isn't the money in politics the reason that's happening? I mean, we can lobby for what we want. I can't throw a vacation on a private jetliner, to my senator to kind of convince him and nudge him in the right direction to what I think is. So that's where we're losing, I think. And the everyday people can't run anymore. And I mean, it should be, we have career politics. I think term limits, aside from financing, is a big thing. I mean, when you have people that are consistently running and they're in the Senate for 20 plus years, I mean, not only you might get bored, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but you're comfortable in a way that you're not going to keep fighting for what you really believe or your constituents believe because they're not the ones voting you in. It's the lobby, it's the people that are supporting you and they're giving you that money, and that's all the people that you have to be beholden to, and that's a problem.
Well, that's why a lot of politics and a lot of elections revolve around how much money did you raise. Phil Murphy is double digits in the lead in New Jersey. He's raised plenty more, although they both agreed to state financing, which is like $13 and change million they each get. Can't go over that, obviously, because Phil Murphy is a wealthy person. Yeah. So, but he already knew that he had these double-digit leads, and he already knew the unpopularity of Chris Christie and Donald Trump, specifically in New Jersey, would give him enough of a boost that he didn't necessarily need to just rely on money.
We could hope.
So many politicians do.
Yeah.
They rely on how much money they can get from small. They say that they care so much about small donors, which the maximum is $2,500 per person. Yet a super PAC, all they have to do is say they're not affiliated, and all of a sudden they can raise millions of dollars untraceably to support whoever they want,
but then
as long as they don't use direct names.
But then every advertisement has paid for by
for by whatever committee, Alliance for.
So I'm not really sure how that works.
But those kind of things, it's similar to George Bush and Barack Obama not using Donald Trump's name in their speeches, but alluding to it. It's the same spectrum, so you can't necessarily say you disagree with one side, but then say that it's okay for them to talk about what they talked about, to mention the things that they already know everybody associates with the current administration. You know, a person like Donald Trump is going to be fed off of animosity. And maybe it's kind of a little bit like, you know, saying he who shall not be named or something like that, or those we don't speak of.
When fighting monsters, less.
Indeed. And honestly, if you
so is that where your thinking comes along of going down to his level? Do you think that if we do, we'll eventually become the monster? Almost like in The Dark Knight, right? Harvey Dent? Wouldn't that be almost like a...
No, I would say it's more like Bane, right?
Okay.
Like Trump lives in the darkness. It doesn't matter if you go down there, he wins. It doesn't even matter if you win the argument.
So you're going into his house, and in his house, his rules run, and you're not going to win.
You are degrading yourself and your character. You either support that line of thinking, the line of red meat and division, or you don't.
Okay.
And you, if you want a short-term gain of giving people the satisfaction of you saying, you know, having your speaking like your English translator, Luther, or you don't. And what will it really bring if any of them say anything? Then Trump fires back, and then we're all waiting to see, well, Trump fired back. What are Obama or Bush going to say? And now it's a rap battle.
Okay.
So,
I mean, we do have situations like Senator McCain, Senator Corker, who are not going to be running for re-election, or McCain, who was re-elected to a 6-year term, but is unlikely because of his medical diagnosis.
Unfortunately, because he's a hero right now, and that's crazy to say.
I've always supported him regardless of politics. I mean, I obviously didn't vote for him, but I believe wholeheartedly that 90% of the time he's doing what he thinks is actually best. And when you have situations like Corker or McCain, who are not going to be beholden to whatever lobbyist or whatever group financed their election, they can start saying things that they really feel are actually pertinent to the conversation. They can start voting no, voting against their party, voting against their president, speaking out, things like that, because they are not afraid anymore. And I think a large majority of Americans are afraid. They're either saying, oh, shit, if I don't support Donald Trump, then I'm not patriotic, or, oh, man, if I support Donald Trump, all my friends are going to hate me.
Is that brave, though? Does that warrant a commendation because you no longer have a horse in the game that now you can say what you want? I think what you have to look at is voting records. So Bob Corker, no longer running, can say what he wants because he's not going to get running. That doesn't show courage to me because now you have nothing to lose. So
honestly, some of the most brave people in the world are people that don't have anything to lose. I mean, that's why someone runs charging into battle, knowing they're going to die.
But they have nothing to lose because he won, and you know, I could be wrong. You know, I'm not.
Everybody.
I don't know if Corker and McCain. I mean, everyone had something bad to say about Trump before. At least, you know, some in his party did.
Corker,
you know, most of them
supported Trump.
Did he? Right off the bat.
Or at the very least, he was very cordial about discussing. This is new.
Yeah. Of course. And again, like you said, he has no horse in the game, which is why he can.
So why won't, when you already know you're not running again? But what I want to see is Paul Ryan.
Well, I'm really glad you just said Paul Ryan because he's already been on, in his little white bow tie, talking about how funny it is to be in the White House surrounded by so many liberals and billionaires.
He's the worst apologist of them all. And like someone as powerful and as important as Paul Ryan, you know, Paul Ryan does not believe in anything Trump says, the agenda Trump wants to push. He's probably really upset he can't push his agenda because he's an agenda guy. He's a writing bills guy. That's who he is. But then he's out there just defending him, dodging questions, not making any light of it. I think he was just on MSNBC or NBC, some show, where they asked him, how do you know that the new tax reform, without getting to tax reform, will not help Trump? And he just shrugged it off by saying, oh, well, we don't know because we haven't seen his taxes. But yet he could. How many times has he blocked a bill in Congress that would have let us see his tax return? So, I mean, don't get me started about Paul Ryan. He's the worst
New Jersey has Bill Pascrell, and Bill Pascrell has been adamant in trying to get those tax returns released, and it will not happen.
As long as Paul Ryan keeps being an apologist.
Paul Ryan is an interesting figure. Paul Ryan being the Speaker of the House from Wisconsin. I'm also partially convinced that he's secretly Aaron Rodgers. It's him without.
There are
beard,
striking
honestly.
similarities.
There are striking similarities. Considering that Paul Ryan has to maintain some kind of order as Speaker of the House, he has to maintain his party's tow line. He has to toe the line. And Paul Ryan supporting things like the tax reform package or any of these notions about strong conservative government, getting rid of Medicaid, reducing amounts of money given to those who are in poverty. I mean, this is a person who has gone on national television and apologized for his views on poverty and for his views on the poor. And at the same time, because he is the Speaker of the House of Representatives and a Republican, and thus the Speaker of the Republicans, has to go in line with that, or else he ends up like...
Well, he's being challenged. Do you think there's no shot, right? Randy Bryce? That's the person challenging him?
I don't think that he's... No, I
probably
think Paul
not.
Ryan has a significant control because he's played these cards so neutrally. I mean, this is a person who was one of the last people to fall in line with Donald Trump, and even so, I actually still support him a little bit because regardless of whether or not it looks like he has a spine, there is a modicum of resistance because he's leading the House of Representatives, the People's House. I mean, the Senate is 100 people that are representatives of the states. The House of Representatives is supposed to be the representatives of the people, and he is ironically enough, beholden to both his party and the people of Wisconsin in the district in which he is elected from. So when you have someone like him openly remarking about the president and laughing about him and lampooning him, I'm not sure what event he was at in his little white bow tie, but like he said, I've never seen so many liberals and billionaires as I did when I was in the White House.
Okay, but does that get circulation? And then how much does fake news play into how everyone believes? I mean, I've been trying to get into that for a little bit.
Honestly,
let's talk about fake news for a little bit.
The term fake news. It's been coined. It's been
who
thrown around.
Steve, who coined it originally? Because it wasn't Trump.
Well, no, it was an idea that came out of. It was a report that came out about Facebook and the dissemination of fake news and how prevalent it was and how most people consume their news from
social media sites versus
and so that
traditional
idea of fake news was a talking point going around about how Trump won, and Trump, after he was inaugurated, flipped it around and called the media fake news.
Well,
and he sort of owned that idea.
I mean, you have to give it to him. With all the things I dislike about him, he's a master marketer. Like, you have to give him credit.
That's how he sells his name for hotels. He doesn't actually run them. But this is actually where the whole idea for the second page even came around.
For sure.
Most people, 91% of people, according to Google research, will not scroll past the first page in a search for anything. And again, a lot of these people already know what they're looking for. But when it comes to things like a YouTube search, like an regular internet search or search for anything in general, when you're looking for a newspaper article or you're hitting Control F to find something, you usually know where you're going, but for the most part, you won't go past the first page.
Yeah.
And on the second page, you might actually have found the legitimate information you needed, but fake news became so popular, not popular, but became so prominent because people were so willing to click on the first thing that they saw and then believe it because it was there. I grew up with teachers telling me, don't get any of your citation from Wikipedia because the internet can't be trusted. You can't trust that.
But yet that's what our media is now. It's Wikipedia. I mean,
exactly.
We're an example of it.
Like fear mongering in a way, though. Like
most people
trust the internet.
No, because most people, especially when I was growing up, and obviously these are all different times, they say get a book, get something that's been published, that's been peer reviewed, that's been fact checked.
Yeah, but
nobody wants to do that because that takes too much time, and you want to see a 30-second clip on YouTube about how Hillary Clinton has some child sex ring under a pizza shop, and they were so willing to believe that got shared 8 million times before it was hardcore debunked.
Yeah,
and the most recent report from Facebook is that 8.7 million people shared these fake news stories, and less than 75% of that actually shared legitimate news stories.
But don't you think there's a bigger underlying reason or something behind it? For example, Obama not being an American, not being born here. I mean, he went, got his long form certificate, debunked it. Why even after? I mean, there was clear proof. I mean, you can't, come on. He born in America. Why did
Trump even admitted it after he was elected?
Yeah, but there's people that still believe it. So, I mean, fake news, social media, I really think is detrimental to our society at the moment, unless we learn how to curb it in a bit.
It's a confirmation bias.
I also think that it's killing traditional journalism. And these people that might care about what they're reporting, that might really care about getting real news and real information out there, they know that their careers are over if that's what they really focus on. People want that soundbite, the talking points. And maybe it's up to, a concerted effort like what we're trying to do here, what other podcasting shows try to do. We're almost self-regulating the media. And, I'm not an expert, I'm not a scholar, but I'm here because I care. And I want to do my best to inform and at the same time learn myself. I'm always learning, I'm always reading. By far, I'm no expert, but I want to be here to help people get past the first page. And so I mean, all in all, I really think that fake news has impacted our politics in a way that I don't know if we could ever come back from. And I don't know what it would look like to come back from that or how to even start.
I wonder, though, does fake news fall under the purview of free speech where you can say anything you want about a politician because they're in the public sphere? If I want to say that Donald Trump has teeny tiny little fingers or that Hillary Clinton is secretly a robot, I can say all those things, and if someone chooses to believe me, that's their choice.
But you can't pass it off as news. It's not.
But there's nothing that regulates that. There's nothing that says what is news.
But then we get into the bigger question of bigger government. Should we regulate that now? And that's a whole other can of worms that we really, really want to delve into that. But anyways, with the fake news, so there's been a lot of little crazy tactics. We have one gubernatorial and one congressional election that we wanted to talk about to kind of segue into something
Both
bigger.
Of them just happened to be in the South.
Well,
we're not talking about statues.
So talk to me a little bit about Roy Moore.
Okay.
Tell everyone a little bit about
I
him.
honestly don't even know how it happened because obviously most people in the Republican Party, they voted for Donald Trump. That's how he became president and how he got the primary there. He backs Luther Strange in the Alabama senatorial race. And
sorry to cut you off, but apparently when he found out that Luther Strange didn't win, he was livid.
Well,
like he went after everyone for convincing him to, and that's almost like he's seeing that his name doesn't carry that much weight anymore. When you have people like Bannon and really right wing conservatives, pretty much going against him. But anyway, I'm sorry.
So you go off of the fake news stuff. You go off of the hot topic, the things that everybody wants to talk about for 10 seconds and then move on. So you have a guy that comes on stage with a loaded gun. Well, I mean, I don't know if it was loaded. I don't know if he ever fired it, but he comes on stage with a gun saying that homosexuality should be illegal, that Islam is a fake religion, or only 17% of it is legit, even though Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all Abrahamic religions. They all, divine from the Old Testament. These people that are now running on the hatred that Donald Trump won on and now expounding on it. They're going further. They're seeing how much further can I take this? Like, he won. He beat Luther Strange because people saw him as the same thing that they saw Donald Trump as when he was running against Hillary Clinton or against the other 8 candidates in the Republican primary. He was an outsider. He was going to shake things up, drain a swamp, when all he did was just add more swamp monsters, make it darker, and make it deeper so that the regular people who are already struggling to keep our heads above the swamp water are now drowning. And what can we do about it? People that live in New Jersey, we want to say something to a representative from another state or a senator from another state. They are not obligated to listen to us. All we have is Bob Menendez and Cory Booker. And that's all we get. Despite the fact that the decisions of senators, like if Roy Moore wins,
which he might. Everything's indicating
tied
he will.
42-42
yeah.
in the polls.
And to that, Bannon, I think he said he's challenging 17 open seats
exactly. And then
with far-right candidates.
You go to that and you say that people like that who are now in the private sector are challenging, primarying as they call it, anybody who stands up to Trump, regardless of whether they deserve to be in office or not. The money flows to the people who are going to challenge what they don't like. So you have someone like Roy Moore who gets his backing from people like Steve Bannon and probably the NRA now, and they go on stage and they rile Jesus. They go on stage, they rile people up, and they give them these no time to actually process what they're actually saying. I mean, does he really honestly think that he's going to get into the Senate and somehow all of a sudden everybody's going to have a gun? Homosexuals are going to be rounded up into concentration camps and Muslims are going to be kicked out.
By the way, but Roy Moore is not repressing anything at all. He's just a stand-up, straight-up guy.
Honestly, that's probably the only good factor he has is that he's not hiding anything. Honestly, he's being he's being his Freudian id. He's just letting everything out, and people are taking it. And I don't want to pigeonhole people that live in the South or saying that people from Alabama are rednecks or anything like that. But when you have a strong majority of the electorate, at least in the Republican primary, choosing this person, and you want this person to now be the representative of your state, then you're now giving everybody bad names. Yeah.
He was giving out AR-15 rifles the day before he won the primary. I mean, that's like a stunt that apparently is now becoming commonplace within.
They have the governor, the former senator, now running for governor of
He's
Georgia,
state
Michael
senator.
Williams, state
Yeah.
senator, Michael Williams giving out bump stocks right after, obviously now trying to capitalize on a national tragedy that whether you're a conspiracy theorist or you're a liberal or you're a conservative, you know it was a tragedy. You know that it could have possibly been lessened or avoided. And we are now
58 people dead and 546 injured is a tragedy.
You can't do that with a knife. You can't do that with a car. You can probably do that with a bomb, as you saw in Mogadishu. I mean, over 300 people died there. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a person who is now running a campaign to be elected to a public office that every vote he casts could affect people in New Jersey, Wisconsin, South Dakota, Texas, wherever. And yet we're not allowed to contact them. We're not allowed to tell them, please don't do this. You know, we can only funnel money into a super PAC or, you know, message your friends on Facebook and tell them don't let this happen. And it doesn't really work because it doesn't float. People aren't hearing it because all they're seeing is a guy on stage in a big cowboy hat with a gun in his hand saying exactly what these people want to hear, giving them their confirmation bias that only Christianity is here, that we're a Christian nation, and therefore I am your representative. Jesus himself tapped me on the shoulder.
Okay, so before, you know, a few minutes ago, you had said that you don't think Roy Moore is going to show up into the Senate, and then all of a sudden, you know, things are going to be passing left and right, and that might be the case. But Steve Bannon is challenging every open seat except Ted Cruz's, right? Let's say they win a few. The next election cycle, they win a few more. The only thing really holding Trump and not letting the far conservatives in Congress do whatever they want is the thin line of moderates still in Congress. And Paul Ryan. They've held up their end of it by not going completely right. But if those people start falling off, if those people start retiring because of the fake news, because the other day I read, I forget who it was, said that it's getting tiring to be a Republican. Yeah, because you know you're doing your job as best as you can or how you think you should be doing it, and you're defending your conservative principles, at least what you think them to be. But then you go back home and your constituents are just shitting on you because they think that you're not defending Trump enough. So isn't Trump winning in a way if this becomes a long string of now far right conservative wins within Congress and the Senate? That could open a whole.
Listen, that all
you
started,
just need a couple of people.
That all started in 2009. Once Barack Obama got elected, he had maybe 2.5 years where he had control of both houses and also the White House for that party, the Democratic Party. And we got things done like the Affordable Care Act. We got, you know, marriage equality and all these other things that happened under those 2 years. But in the course of time, over 1,000 seats got flipped, and it wasn't because they took Senate seats, and it wasn't because they took the House of Representatives necessarily. It's because they flipped mayors, they flipped state senators, state representatives, they flipped town councils, they flipped sheriffs, all these elected offices, elected judgeships. They flipped them. Over 1,000 positions that were held by Democrats locally were flipped to Republicans, so that now the national makeup looks just like the map that Fox News puts up every day that's just splotched red with little blue islands. But those little blue islands can constitute 65 million voters and probably double that in actual people that maybe didn't vote or can't vote or too young or whatever. Those blue areas were the major cities. Los Angeles and New York is where 80% or 50%, whatever percentage it is, it's where such a strong amount of our national wealth comes from. But these rural districts that don't get the news, that have probably never traveled outside the country, they don't know other people, they know their neighbors, and that's it. Of course, they're going to go that way. Yeah,
and just to your point, just to go back and show the severity or just how big this is. Right after the election last year, November, 69 out of the 99 state legislative chambers are held by the GOP, and they hold 33 governorships out of 50. So, I mean, you're right. They're flipping it at a grassroots base. Gerrymandering isn't going to help if they restructure their districts in a way that makes it so everyone's voting for who they feel they should be voting for, which is, again, a whole other topic. But, I mean, how do you combat this? Like, what's going to happen?
Honestly,
is the GOP going to crumble? Is there going to be a third party now, far left?
Actually, you see both parties splintering. Before the election started, I was looking at all these maps and saying it was almost impossible for Donald Trump to have flipped over the Electoral College. That there was going to be people that would stand in the way of this, but it didn't happen. It's like every time I watch Titanic, I think there's a chance that it's going to miss the iceberg. And every single time it hits the iceberg, and every single time Jack drowns. Even though there's plenty of room on that door and everybody knows it. But they didn't think. They didn't think ahead. Rose didn't think there's room on this door for two people. Or maybe she thought, if I try picking him up, we'll both go down.
So who's Rose in this analogy?
in this analogy, we are Rose.
Okay.
We chose to let Jack drown. I know. I blame you partially.
All right, so then I guess just to wrap this little part up. So my question
Rose did go on to live a great
because of Jack, right?
life, though.
Yeah, but at Jack's detriment.
Yeah, and then she threw away a multi-million-dollar rock into the ocean.
Gem of the ocean, or whatever. The heart of the ocean.
She gave it back to Jack. Gave it to Jack.
Yeah, okay, well, we don't have 80 years to wait for everybody to tell us, okay, Barack Obama was a good president.
Which might happen. I mean, in retrospect,
it might honestly happen.
All right, so my question, I guess, to both of you right now, do you think people care about fake news?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that they don't care about the concept of fake news. I think they genuinely just want to be entertained. We live in a society that is so stressed out, that is constantly moving. We're constantly bombarded by things. You've got a double-digit increase in children being addicted to cell phones and tablets and screens and video games and such things that people in our generation started. Everybody blames millennials and people saying, you guys are ruining everything. And these people are 20, 22 years old. I mean, what were you doing when you were 22 years old? Were you trying to save the world, or were you just trying to save your life?
The baby boomers will say they were, which they were.
But, at the same time, it was a different generation.
The thing is, the baby boomers raised the millennials.
They did.
And so you cannot now point to the millennials and say,
I think you're skipping
a lost
giant generation.
And you're the one that raised them.
Yeah.
Right?
No, the millennials were probably the first generation that wasn't raised by the generation before them. They were raised by each other. They were raised by what they saw on TV. They were raised by the Kardashians and the Donald Trumps of the world.
But why is that?
Because they had so much access that we never had before. A book could never do for you what Twitter does. You could never open a book and just see anything you wanted in the world. You had to actually go look for it. You had to try and find out what you wanted to know. And if you couldn't, then you just didn't know. So now all of a sudden you can follow somebody on Twitter. You can get all the porn you want. You can hear anything you want. You can listen to Donald Trump saying, grab him by the pussy 15 million times, but no woman that voted for him is ever going to be like, he's a bad guy. They still voted for him because
it was just locker room talk, It's what
guys do. But honestly, I've never done that. And any time I've ever made any kind of joke like that, I've always at least clarified it, or at least knew I was being listened to. He didn't know he was being listened to.
So it's a real thought, or real.
Bush. That was a legitimate thought that he has. He's on his third wife.
So then, the Donald Trump presidency is a direct result. Of our society.
Yes,
the Donald Trump presidency is a direct reaction to the election of the first black president.
Exactly.
Race does have a very big part to do with that.
Honestly, though, but I'm trying to say that in this millennial age, in this day and age where we have everything at our fingertips, yet we choose not to take them. Like, this podcast could be available to 9 billion people, but maybe only a million. Probably, right? A million? You think a million? A million people might watch. But,
we hope for more.
A lot of people said that because of everything, because of the way Barack Obama mobilized small donors and social media, that the next president would have to be a celebrity or an athlete. And that's because things like, you look at how Arnold Schwarzenegger won in California.
Yep, but
you can't say that anybody without any name recognition is going to have as much of an effect as someone whom everybody knows. So you can't use an athlete because most of them aren't 35, which is the age you have to be to be president. And most of them suffer injuries or are so divided because everybody chooses their team that there's no way that they could actually win. So now everybody talks about things like Kid Rock running for Senate, or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson,
or Peyton Manning running,
or any of these celebrities. He might. But that's the thing, though. We're excited about stuff like that because these are celebrities.
Name recognition,
Name recognition. Nobody's saying anything like, "Oh, geez."
But
I hope Joe Biden runs again, because if he had run in the first place, he probably would have won. But I personally believe that he stepped aside because Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, and maybe even Barack Obama, sort of, maybe even without saying it, promised her this spot.
And he was just a good lieutenant and moved out of the way.
Exactly. But if he had stuck around, Joe would have probably won.
But before, let me ask you guys a question.
Yeah.
Why is it a problem? And I'm not saying you're saying this, right?
Yeah. But
maybe Hillary is ambitious, but why is it a problem that she's ambitious, right? Why are we in such a rush to push this accomplished woman to the side?
I think
is there something that is deep rooted within all of us?
Of course.
That we can't explain?
Of course.
I have this idea that there are a lot of racist people out there that don't realize they're racist, right? There's a lot of sexist people out there that don't realize that.
Until you're put in a situation.
And I'm including myself in this bucket.
Yeah.
But I just feel like there is this sort of push to sort of just tell Hillary to go away or don't aim. How dare you want to be president?
Honestly,
how dare you want to break that ceiling? Don't do that.
I definitely want to step in and say that I think that a strong majority of people, everybody's got a deep-seated bigotry or racism, and everybody at some point in their life has looked at someone and made an immediate prejudicial judgment based on that. I don't think it was so much that she was a woman, even though there's part of me that does, but it's the name. It's the Clinton name and something you said before that we are not a dynastic thing. Even though we had the Bushes, we had the Roosevelts, we
would have had the Clintons.
Would have had the Clintons, but people spent 20, 30 years hearing all these bad things from the right about Hillary Clinton, and it stuck even with people that supported her. And despite the fact that she had 3 million more popular votes, she didn't win the Electoral College because the states that voted against her gave votes to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because she was a woman, because I know I've spoken to women who say they don't think that women should be in office.
Oh, of
course.
These
are older people.
Yeah, and okay, so to Steve's point before, that made me think of something. With social media now, and it took a while, in the early 2000s, well, later to the mid 2000s, when social media really started getting prevalent, it was something that only young people did. A few years ago, everyone started on it. Your grandparents are on it. Everyone started getting on it. So
I remember when you used to have a college email.
To have to get on. Now anyone can have it. A 7-year-old can have it. Okay, but now with what Steve said before, do you think now that the baby boomers and a generation that maybe more inherently has some prejudices instilled in them, that now with this open, social media, anyone can say whatever they want, then maybe they're kind of pushing this on another generation that's not as educated or that's maybe scared? I mean, millennials are scared. Most of us, we're out of college, can't find good work, can't buy a house. The income's not what you thought it would be. Job security's not what you thought it would be. So now you're looking for someone to blame. And if someone gives you a cop-out, if someone gives you an out, you're going to take it.
That's what John McCain said. You're looking for scapegoats and not how to solve problems.
So again, I really think, and I mean, there is an inherent sexism, racism in America, and it's going to take a long time. But then you have
conservatives saying, well, we supported Sarah Palin. I was like, well, consider that you probably supported Sarah Palin because you probably thought she was hot. And that's why you had the things like the nail-in Palin and you have Tina Fey going on and making fun of her, but they lampoon her in a way that shows that she's not a politician. She's an object. She's a woman. She's something that you'll vote for her because she's standing next to John McCain, and damn, that makes her look even better.
Yeah.
But they never really listened to the stupid things that were coming out of her mouth.
Yeah.
She wasn't a good Republican. She wasn't a good politician in general. Yeah, maybe she won governorship in Alaska.
She was a pre-Trump, before Trump.
She was.
She was kind of like this ridiculous.
She made it easy pill to swallow.
Yeah. I guess, you weren't as shocked when someone like Trump came out because she kind of segued, the...
And now you have millennials that have been raised in this generation to think that the stuff you see on TV and the stuff you can follow on Twitter, Tumblr, and BuzzFeed and all these things, that's the only place to get information from, and they stop asking each other questions. They stop sitting down across the table and talking to each other, while the baby boomers and the older generation, whom people like Bill Nye say the only way to fix everything is to just wait for this generation to die out. And if you look back on history, every time we've advanced, it's been after a large segment of the population aged out or wasn't able to participate anymore. But now everybody can. Your grandmother has Facebook now. Anybody that wants to spew their racism or their hatred can do so. And while Barack Obama was president, the alt-right and these people who had this idea were quietly gaining ground. They were building troops. They were building a base on the internet while nobody was watching, because you don't have to watch it.
But I also think that the internet gives people a cover because you don't feel as if you're being watched in a
moment.
moment.
It's like driving your car. You can have road rage and say anything you want. Like, you get yelled racial slurs at you because that person was driving. But if they were walking past you in the street,
they wouldn't say anything. He took a red light right after he called me a spick. He took the red light and went going because he didn't want me to react to it.
Exactly, because they're so afraid of the reaction, but they feel so protected, which is why you have people like Donald Trump. They embolden people the same way George Bush said that terrorists were emboldened by our inaction.
Yeah, and something that really disgusted me, I'm not sure when it happened, earlier this week or last week, but there were, and I forget what university, I think 3 or 4 cheerleaders, young girls, I think 18, 19, that went on this rant on social media, like, I forget how it got out.
The N-word,
Yeah, and they were like, fuck the N, how do you think that's right in 2017? And then worst of all, why do you put that up thinking it's not going to get traction, and then when it gets traction,
well, just like at the university where you had the white supremacist rally, where the guy yelled at the protesters, "You're giving us the best recruiting tool that we can use." It's the same thing that the KKK did, but the KKK is old school. It's, nobody is going to take seriously the KKK when you've got Grand Dragon Masters and all this other stuff, and it was like this old fraternal organization that dudes did, and you put a cloak on and you hid behind it, just like people hide behind the internet now. That's the white hood. Today, the internet has now become the white hood that the KKK used.
I like that.
And now they are walking the streets and protesting, thinking that they're safe because they're in numbers, and because they can say, oh, free speech this, free speech that, while at the same time they're carrying torches and telling other people that they want to exterminate certain races, or that only their race or their color, because white is not a race.
No, it's
a white supremacist is not talking about their race, because then they'd be saying Irish, Italian, Saxon, whatever. They're talking about the color of their skin, making them supreme to everybody else. And that is not free speech. That is violence. That's incitement. That is instilling fear in people who then have to react. And if they react the same way that these people are to them, somehow now they're wrong. Somehow they're squashing my free speech rights, and Fox News
both
replays
sides
the exact
were wrong.
same video of people bringing
they
down
were
a barricade
generally
in
good
Berkeley.
people. Like, whatever. But anyways, look, we stayed a little bit too much on the First Amendment. We're coming down to the bottom of the hour, and I know that we wanted to talk a little bit about the Second Amendment, which is why we brought up Ray Moore, Vegas, and Roy Moore, and State Senator Michael Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So you wanted to read the
I mean, honestly, it's probably the shortest amendment to the Constitution, the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's very simple. It's forward. People that adamantly support the Second Amendment hypocritically do not adamantly in the same way support the First Amendment. But like I said,
so
at the
what do you
beginning,
think that means?
The point of the second
page
is that we have to look past that, because the reason this Second Amendment was written is that the British Crown, King George III and his predecessors, in order to control the populations of colonies, whether they're in America, Canada, South America, Africa, Asia, wherever the British Empire
it was
touched,
by force.
It was by force.
Yeah.
They would take the weapons of the people and instill, which again we have, the Third Amendment, they put soldiers right there in front of you with guns. It was fear and intimidation. And when the Founding Fathers put together this Bill of Rights 10 years after we got our country, they understood that the only way to truly protect freedom and liberty was to ensure that the population could always defend itself.
Okay.
Now, the point
from
of
who?
that, from the government.
Okay.
So the point of it was
from slave revolts.
And from, of course, yeah, and they wanted to obviously be able to put down slave revolts and those kind of situations.
I'm saying this live. We have to have a racism episode, because there's
definitely
there's something I want to go off of that.
The point was that they established this amendment to make sure that people could defend themselves against the government from tyranny and things like that. And obviously, people have expounded on it. You have Federalist Papers and all these politicians and stuff that have remarked on it. But this is what the amendment says. And now we've gotten to a point where the government has turned it around, and instead of taking all of our guns away from us, they're telling us have more guns, but be afraid of your neighbor. They're now telling you that you have a Second Amendment right to protect yourself from other people, not from the government.
Okay.
They're making you into a sheep that thinks that you should feel unsafe. There are more guns in this country than there are people. Under Barack Obama, more guns were sold than at any other time in history.
Because they were scared. They thought that the black guy was coming after them. FEMA camps in Texas, and he's going to take us all. And
at the same time, as soon as things like barbed wire and multi-fire guns were invented, that's when things like concentration camps came along. That's when a few people with guns were able to control hundreds of people without them.
So in a very just specific, you had just said right before you read it that you think it, well, after you read it, that you think it's very straightforward and simple. So what do you, in a few words, what do you think the Second Amendment means, and how would you like to see the U.S. move forward in terms of gun control, or, what are your beliefs in it? Like, where do you see this going? Because I think we're going to differ a little bit.
I think that you have to take very, very seriously the first line, a well-regulated militia. I mean,
and wouldn't that be the National Guard?
Well, yeah, people say that it is the National Guard because in Article 2 of the Constitution, I believe, it says that the president is also the commander of the various militias if they're called up for national duty. So, yeah, you can segue that into say that that's the National Guard.
Okay.
But at the same time, we have local police forces, and you have your own citizenry that form their own militias, which you see all the time. These right-wing militias are now popping up everywhere saying the government's going to collapse and anarchy is going to happen, and now we're going to have that. Okay. So do we want to live in that post-apocalyptic fascist society because everybody now has guns, and those of us who chose not to are now going to be victims of this, where we become the people that are herded together and forced to work in order to provide for the others, like in The Walking Dead, the Negan groups, or where you have societies in Africa that are just, they run around to villages with a couple guys in Kalashnikovs, and they raid villages, they kill, they rape, they pillage, take what they want to survive. But they don't actually produce anything themselves. So they're using the fact that they are armed to control everything.
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen here. But what I think...
You may not think that, but nobody thought that was going to happen in Germany or Italy.
You're right. And there you go. And that's to my point now. So what I'm thinking you're saying is that we should leave up the ownership to guns to the people that the Constitution deemed them to be, which is the militia, the local police force, etc. Okay.
But the militia is supposed to be made up of various people. Now the National Guard has been taken into a branch of the military.
Yeah, okay, but fine. But they're still regular everyday people. But then you get indoctrinated with some sense of patriotism and loyalty to whatever. But you can call me conspiracy theorist, whatever. I don't feel particularly safe when I see a cop. I don't put it past our government to one day maybe come after us. So in a perfect world, I don't condone violence. I don't think there should be any guns if that was a perfect world, but it isn't a perfect world. And in my opinion, if the government has some form of a gun or whatever, let it be a machine gun, whatever, then I should be able to have it. Because what happens
I disagree with that.
I know you do, and it's fine. And I guess this is the point of the show. But what happens if the militia or the police department in a moment of crisis comes to my house with AR-15s and all I have to defend myself is a shotgun or a 9mm?
Well,
what's going to happen?
I would say the same thing. If you
you're going to lose anyway.
No, because you're looking at it as
but
how big are my arms? How much weight can I lift? You're not looking at it as, okay, if for some reason the president decides to declare war on the American people, or we're so broken up and spread out that it's not plausible to think that all of a sudden this whole group of people will now, like-minded, hive-minded, turn against people and start dragging people out of their houses.
But you just said it happened. It's happened.
It happened before because people gave up, because they stopped resisting, because they
thought it couldn't happen. But don't you think we're giving up now in a way?
So if soldiers come to your door with AR-15s or M5s, whatever gun they decide to come to your door with, and all you have is a shotgun or 9mm, it doesn't matter what gun you have. You shoot someone in the face, you shoot them in the face, and they're dead. And most people are not willing to take the chance of getting shot in the face, which is why you have police armed with military equipment, bulletproof vests,
which Obama made very hard to do when he was in office.
Trump's executive orders wiped that out.
A guy that didn't want to do executive orders, they talk crap all the time because all Obama did was executive orders. But how many has he had now?
More than him. Yeah. But the point was that yes, I think that everybody should have the right to be armed if they want to, but not so because they're afraid. We can't fix it now. We've gone through hundreds of years in Supreme Court cases where we're now ingrained in our society that guns. Yeah. They don't look at it the way that I think that it should be looked at as, we have guns so that they can't be taken away from us. It's kind of like that. It's like a full circle,
Look, we disagree on the Second Amendment, but I feel that a lot of people that feel the way I do think that there shouldn't be any background checks. There shouldn't be any legislation telling you how or how many guns you can get. That I disagree with. I think it should be legislated way more. I mean, you register a car to drive a car. You take a driver's ed course to learn how to drive a car. Then you have to be licensed, and you're in a state registry. Why is it crazy to think that that's not the right thing to do with a weapon? You should have
regulating people, not the guns themselves. I personally also don't believe that people should just be able to willy-nilly go into a store and buy a gun, because
no, of course,
the way people are now,
a 16-year-old goes to a gun convention and just buys a gun without anything. I mean,
and then goes
that's
to school
ridiculous.
And shoots up his school.
But there's a lot of countries where they have where you have to sign up to the military for a year or two, where the gun culture is a little different, and you see the differences there. There's not a lot of shootings like there are here. There's not a lot of gun violence. I think it's not really necessarily
more
the
people
guns.
Were killed in the Vegas shooting than have died in all the terror attacks in England in the past 10 years. And England being a country with strict gun laws, terrorist attacks happen with them being hit by cars or by stabbings and stuff like that. And everybody's like, "Oh, you want to start regulating that?" I was like, "Well, we already do. We regulate cars. We know who's in that car. That's how we knew who hit that protester in Charlottesville."
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate, though, there is no amendment that mentions automobile.
You're right. That's because they didn't exist then. And then you go to the aspect of, okay, if we're all going to be armed, then we should all have single-shot rifles. That's not the point. The point is that I believe that if you're going to have guns, that you should know what you're doing. A well-regulated militia.
Well-regulated.
It doesn't say
decides
regulated.
that,
It says well-regulated, and it should be decided by the Constitution, by
Who
Congress.
decides what? What are
Congress-
well-regulated
It's
militias?
like it says it on the paper, but who is going to decide who
The
is
well-reg-
competent?
That's why most laws
carry
have to be
a weapon.
passed in Congress by a 3/4 majority or 2/3 majority, because people, when they founded this country, understood that never are you going to have 100% agreement on something. But if you have a strong majority agreeing something, then it should be done. I mean, how did we go through this entire country with Jim Crow laws and all these other things that put people of specific races or creeds down, that outlawed homosexuality or outlawed abortion, because a majority of people said that it was wrong at the time, and it kept going until the majority flipped, until people decided, okay, maybe it's okay to have an abortion. Maybe it's okay to be a homosexual. Maybe it's okay to be black. They decided that because we talked about it, they passed laws, and that is what changed things. Laws change things. People rioting in the streets don't change things. People armed with 100 guns. I mean, you can't honestly tell me that a person that has 100 guns in their house is reasonably doing that to hunt or to protect themselves.
No.
You can't even use 100 guns at one time. You can hold one, maybe 2 guns at the same time. If you're Rambo, maybe 3.
Hang on a minute. So, Martin Luther King said riot is the language of.
Yeah.
And so I understand what you're saying about riots not changing things, but riots sometimes lead to revolution. And the fear of a riot could be the impetus for a change. And I'm
That's
not
why you have Bloody Sunday, where you had 6
Yeah.
people shot by British soldiers in
but
Boston.
You're almost going to what I was going to respond to him. I think, and I've said it before, and I'm not the brave one because obviously I haven't done it and I don't think I will. But I think for some real change to happen in this country, at some point, there's going to have to be, unfortunately, you could hate me for saying it or think I'm crazy, some form of bloodshed. Breaking property where it
there's
doesn't.
already been bloodshed.
No, but I mean, bad. Like, you have to see, like, I'm not talking about isolated cases
Everybody
where
has
the
to
media
feel
gets
it.
into it before and they change the whole thing, and then you have, disseminated to whatever side you want. I mean, I'm talking something like live, you're watching where, like, the military, the cops just shoot down a bunch of people and, like...
No, but
and,
what I'm saying is this happens every day, right? So...
But it's almost isolated. Like, you don't see it till it's been disseminated, and then you're choosing how you're seeing it. So, I mean,
okay, I guess I'm saying this. How much blood of black and brown people needs to be shed before we say that, okay, a change needs to happen? So when we say a change needs to happen, or we say that blood needs to be shed, are we saying that white blood needs to be shed? Or so where does the empathy come in for everyone?
I'm not defending the thought, just saying it is hard to empathize what you don't understand. And I feel that a lot of people, even when they have they want to, or they don't understand. And you can't understand. You can't understand what it's like to walk into a store and be followed around because you think you're going to get robbed if you've never experienced it. So I see what you're saying, and I don't know what level of violence, or like you said, you feel there's already been enough, but at the same time, then you need brown and black people then with enough representation in our government to make a change, and there's not. Like, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think there's 1 or 2 black senators in the in the Senate, maybe a handful of Hispanics out of 100, and how many in Congress? I mean, there's more, but it's still not the majority.
That goes back to what I was just saying, that it doesn't matter how many times you riot, how many people die, if you don't pass laws, if you don't have amendments like the 14th Amendment or the 19th Amendment or any of these.
But then how do you upend a system that doesn't let you change a law to what you think it should be? How do you upend that? How do you get in there?
The only way to actually get these things done is to actually work in the process. I mean, Donald Trump won his presidency saying that he was going to destroy the federal government from the inside out. He appoints people to heads of department that specifically have said in the past they don't believe that department should be there, or they wanted to destroy it. The only way to do something is to do it from within. If you do it from without, you get defenses. You get people who say that the taking a knee is besmirching the American flag and disrespecting veterans, when that's not what it was done. But if Colin Kaepernick was white, or if he was the owner of a team and he decided to do that from the inside, it would have gotten a lot different coverage, because Colin Kaepernick was on the outside. He was a soldier, basically. He was throwing a rock at a giant.
Yes and no. I don't know.
Also,
and
just for the record, there are currently
6 black senators.
Kamala Harris, Robin Kelly.
So 6% of the country is represented in the Senate as African American, when I believe a strong 25% are actually African American population-wise.
I thought it was 13.
Something like, well, 13. I mean, it's a strong portion of the population, and eventually those who identify as white or Caucasian will be the minority in this country, and yet, just like a gerrymandering issue, you still have a strong majority of the representation being those people.
Do you think that plays into maybe some of that fear that's going on right now, that maybe for the first time since the inception of the United States, the white race is going to be the minority pretty soon? I mean, in a decade or two, right? That's the time frame that they're saying it's going to happen. Do you think that maybe plays into what's going on right now, this whole reverting back to this alarmist rhetoric and this dividing?
As soon as someone feels threatened, they're going to get angry and violent. And white people in general, people who identify as white or Caucasian or as Christians, they feel like they are assaulted because everybody else isn't just automatically following in lockstep with their own beliefs. So when anybody feels threatened or put into a corner, regardless of how many privileges and how many rights they have, they're going to get aggressive. And considering that most power in this country is concentrated into the hands of Caucasian men, they will use that power. Just as the NFL used its power to keep Colin Kaepernick out of a contract, out of a team.
But then how do you beat that?
That's what I just said. You have to get on the inside. But, you have to find
someone
like Mark Cuban.
But will they let you get on the inside?
No, you have to have someone like Mark Cuban, someone who naturally believes it.
Mark Cuban becomes president. It doesn't mean magically that Mark Cubans are going to be sprinkled all over Congress and Senate. That's one guy.
It's the same.
I love Mark Cuban.
Say the same thing about Donald Trump. I mean, he backed Luther Strange and he didn't get it. It's not like when Donald Trump got elected, all these little Donald Trumps popped up. You had people that either supported him strongly or did not support him. So now, if you get people who legitimately and genuinely want something, like you have Barack Obama, who's a community organizer. He went from the Senate to the White House in just a couple of years because he genuinely believed in most of the things that he was saying, regardless of what his party was. He couldn't have run on the Republican ticket. He had to run as a Democrat.
I think the country's a lot different now than it was in 2008.
It is much different. And like I said, 1,000 seats flipped in municipalities.
But is the piss already in the pool?
Yeah,
obviously. I mean, we're trying to shock it out in chlorine, and we're all going to be bleached and blinded. And that's what's going to happen. You start stabbing people, taking an eye for an eye, but I don't believe that necessarily. Maybe 15 years ago I believed that. Maybe 12 years ago when I was 18, I probably believed in aggression and an eye for an eye. But at the same time, now I've looked at the foundation of this country. I've looked at how we got from the First Amendment to the 27th Amendment. I've looked at how we go from the Declaration of Independence to, talking about, people like Roy Moore being able to run in office. We might as well have thrown ourselves back 50 years. And you have to imagine, this is 2017. It's only been about 50 years that African Americans and the civil rights movement even began. There are people alive today who were not allowed to vote before, when they were still of legal age for universal suffrage. There are people alive today that are older than American democracy, but we've made it to this point where now they do. Now they can vote. Now people can vote when they're 17, if they'll be 18 by the time the election comes around, because they played somewhat by the rules, because you worked from the inside, because they used the rules that were there. They got in and they got things changed. That's how marriage equality became, because we went through the Supreme Court. We didn't pass laws because laws were being passed against it.
Look,
they went to the inside. They went to the top.
I'm not anti-white at all, but what I'm thinking is all these things that were passed, inherently, gay marriage, everything you just mentioned right now, there are white people that benefited from that. If you're going to start passing laws where the only people benefiting from it or getting strengthened are black and brown people.
What about the 14th Amendment? What about when you take people from being worth 3/5 of a person to now being
and then how long did it take from that
to Jim Crow?
Through Jim Crow, through Reconstruction, through the Civil Rights era, to still in 2008 electing first black president, then for 8 years just hearing the worst shit come out of people's mouths about our first black president. So I get what you're saying. I just think that there's some inherent,
because like they say, progress
something in the fiber of our nation that I don't know how we're gonna get past it. I don't. I'm not advocating for a way past it here. It's just I don't think I'm naive enough to say it doesn't exist and that there won't be opposition if black and brown people try to strengthen themselves through law. They're gonna get roadblocked. The majority are still white people, and like you said, when their majority is threatened, they're gonna get angry, they're gonna fight, and they're gonna push back. And I think even if you do it the right way,
it's also not fair to, and I'm all about black and brown power and self-reliance and taking what is rightfully deserved, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair to lump all white people in that
of course
group
not
of people who are going to get mad and revolt.
No,
I mean, you have to understand that, yes, if a person of a lighter hue is to benefit from something, it's far more likely that they will support it. Just like you or I will support, things like marriage equality, or because we have gay friends, or that support the right to vote. We believe everybody should have the right to vote, and maybe the voter ID laws are unconstitutional. So yes, we benefit from that too. The point is, though, that, like I said in the beginning, that most people will judge others by their actions and judge themselves by their intent, and not the other way around. We keep judging people by the actions that a few people make. Lumping every white person in to the last few cases of domestic terrorism. Almost every mass shooting has been perpetrated by a Caucasian male. So we can't just say all Caucasian males are prone to this gun violence. At the same time, we can't say that all African Americans are, because then that's the opposite. They say, well, how come nobody cares about all the black-on-black crime in Chicago? How come nobody cares about...
Okay, so in regards to black-on-black crime and gang violence in Chicago, because that is a straw man that is often used, there is no social contract with a gang member.
There isn't.
Right? You have a social contract with the police, right? The police are supposed to be there to serve and protect
their community.
When they are derelict in their duty, there needs to be and should be avenues of recourse. I never signed a contract with a gang member or a drug dealer. So, and this is not excusing it, but this is not to say, if we're in a world where the cops are saying, well, criminals are shooting people, so we should be able to shoot people too, that is not a world that makes sense.
It doesn't.
We are in the upside down.
Yeah.
Good little homage to Stranger Things, in case anybody didn't notice. Listen, if we are in the upside down, then maybe we are. But just like in every story that anybody actually enjoys listening to, inevitably 98% of the time the good guy wins, or the protagonist will generally come out on top, just like with the Constitution, just like with American democracy as it is, where an African American was finally elected president. And as everywhere in history, the pendulum always swings both ways. It couldn't have gone forward, and maybe it was.
So it's like one step forward, two steps back.
Maybe it was living, like a pipe dream to think that right after the first black president,
there'd be a first woman president, and then the first Hispanic, and then the first black woman, and then the first Hispanic.
We start looking at it as like, oh my God, wouldn't that be great if it happened? But nobody actually took a second to think, like,
that all the
43
presidents before were all white, and
is that actually going to happen? And most people that didn't vote. I mean, we're talking about 38,000 people could have swung this election the other way in specific areas.
So you think there's a reason to be hopeful?
Yes, I absolutely do, because I believed when Barack Obama ran and was elected president, it was one of the first times I was ever really, really, really proud.
Oh, me too.
It was the first time I ever believed in government. It was the first time I ever believed that hope and change were legit, not just because they were his taglines.
We were mobilized.
I believed in hope. I believed, you know what, we're the baby steps, we're getting there, just like with the Affordable Care Act. It wasn't the most perfect situation, but if anybody remembers before that, movies like John Q, where someone had to decide, am I going to live or is my kid going to live? Yeah. Do I have to sell my house to pay for something? Why are people that got wounded in the Vegas shooting having to have GoFundMe accounts to pay for them, but at the same time we can afford $22 billion to start a wall on the Mexican border?
And yet, I remember a little bit of praise for Paul Ryan. He's the guy in the House that but shepherded their healthcare plan that would take away a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, when the ACA was passed, it was passed with dozens of Republican amendments. It had debate after debate after debate. They talked about it, and now we got into a society where it's red versus blue, and that's it. And they don't care. They don't want to pass anything on bipartisan lines.
They're not even reading these bills.
They're not.
You have to understand that.
These bills are being written by lobbyists and think tanks at this point, and senators and representatives that are putting their names on it don't really know what they're doing when they're doing that. They're not reading things. They're not writing them themselves.
Yeah,
and that's how it used to be.
But I think that's a conundrum right now with why it wasn't passed, because these people, under their breath, hate Obamacare and they hate the ACA, but they've seen the benefit. They've seen their Costco.
Hang on. Do they hate Obama?
No, they hate Obamacare, but they don't realize that it's the same exact thing as the ACA, and that's what they did to poison it. They tried to get people, they got voters to distance themselves by saying Obamacare, 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 and not realizing that they were voting against something that they were using.
But that's the reason it didn't work and it didn't pass, and that's the reason why it's still the law of the land. These people, through experience, it doesn't matter how much they hated Obama, through experience, realized that they're paying lower. And that's why it didn't pass, because they were calling their representatives, they were calling their senators saying, please do not pass this law. My premiums will go up. I will lose my healthcare coverage. I have a pre-existing condition and it won't be covered. So they got comfortable. I really don't see the Affordable Care Act being overturned. It's been defended. It's been defended by the Supreme Court.
It may not be overturned.
It was defended by the Supreme Court because they gave the government the right to tax. That's the only reason it got upheld in the Supreme Court, is because the court found that the government can pass this law because they pass it as a tax.
Right, but we can see that it may not be able to be overturned, at least not in reconciliation, and then they won't have the votes to do it afterwards. However, it can be sabotaged. It is
being sabotaged. Yeah, I mean, a whole other topic that we don't have time to get into, but Cuba travel, that's being sabotaged by the administration.
Actually, so maybe we should save that for another show. Yeah. But I think a good way to end this show is, or what highlights the second page, is that there are so many people that hear Obamacare do not realize that it.
Yeah.
They'll sign up and want the Affordable Care Act. They heard Obamacare,
and they're
like, kill it.
And and this is the whole reason I wanted to bring up King George III, because this was a person who obviously went mad later in life, but presided over our birth. He was that doctor standing in the room that smacked us on the ass and made us cry, and we became a country because this person didn't think it could happen, just like we didn't think Trump could be president, who told his parliament, ignore the words from this fake Congress, basically, saying that anything that we asked for, even if we extended things like the olive branch petition, even if we tried to reconcile our differences and maybe work with the British Crown, he didn't want it. He wanted all or nothing. He wanted this divine right, which people like Donald Trump think that they're entitled to. They think that God himself or herself.
I don't think Donald Trump believes in divine right.
He does. He believes in divine right the same way that Mussolini and Hitler believed in it. They used religion and they used people's ideas that they want to be led by a strong leader.
No,
I don't. Do you think that he is smart enough to have those complex ideas?
No. I think he's a narcissist. He's a great marketer. He's a businessman, and I don't know him. I believe he ran to promote his brand, and he got caught off guard when he won. And now he's trying to do the best that he can in a situation that he didn't think he was going to get into. But I think to wrap up this episode, we all feel hopeful, and I think that moving forward every week.
Well, we is a strong word.
We is a strong word.
We the people.
We should try and feel hopeful, I think.
The preamble says, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. That's all we are striving for, to form a perfect union, but we all know that there's no such thing as perfect. And we are every day, and while we don't understand the microcosm of 225 some odd years that this country has been around, one of the youngest countries in the world, we might not be able to see everything that's happened in that whole scale of time. But if you look at it on a chart and look at a trajectory, although we've got some dips just like the stock market, eventually it comes back up, and eventually we get further, and eventually we become better people through things like this, through people not being afraid to speak up, for people not being afraid to challenge their friends, and for people like me and you who still have friends that are Trump supporters, and I wouldn't trade any of those friends for anything.
I want to see some of you on this show.
Yeah, so we will definitely have some of them on the show, and I hope so, because those are still people. Those are still our brothers and sisters.
Of course, we're all Americans, and we all should love each other, and we shouldn't bring each other down. So look, I think that there is clearly injustice in this country, in this world. There's differences that need to be worked out. Not everything is peachy and perfect, but we're still a great country. We can still become a better country, and we will be a better country. So with that, I think we're going to end episode 101. We hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you next week. We'll be here every Saturday, and let us know what you want us to talk about, and have a good one.
So it's Joe Oswald
and Jay Martinez
signing off from the second page.
Oh yeah, I'm at Jay Martinez. Well, Jay Martinez Jr. in Twitter, at Jay Martinez Jr.
J-A-Y.
J-A-Y, Martinez Jr.
And what Twitter handle did we give myself? Just
at Joseph S. Oswald.
Yeah, at Joseph S. Oswald. That's my
make sure
first
to follow
Twitter.
us.
I've never really tweeted before.
Yeah.
So
and let us know what you think about the show. First timers here, so any critiques.
Just remember, we're talking past the points. So don't tweet us and say you're a racist or I hate your ideas and that's it, because I'm just not going to pay attention to it.
Or do.
Honestly, you know what? That gives us a follow. So why not?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.